Imagine buying a house and the payment is a stone so massive it takes 20 men to move it, except nobody moves it. Ever. On a small island in Micronesia, giant limestone discs weighing several tons were used as money, and ownership could change hands without the stone physically shifting an inch. Everyone on the island simply agreed who owned it. That's not the strangest currency humans have ever used. We're talking about money made from teeth, feathers, tea, and fur, all treated with the same seriousness we treat paper bills and bank cards today. By the end of this video, you'll never look at a coin the same way again. Here's the thing about currency. It was never really about the material. It was about scarcity, trust, and whether an entire community agreed something had value. If everyone agreed a shell was valuable, a shell became real money. If everyone agreed a stone too heavy to move still counted as payment, that stone became real wealth. Money isn't a special substance. It's a shared belief stamped onto whatever object a society happened to trust. Let's start with currencies that still sort of make sense and build toward the ones that sound completely insane. Squirrel pelts in medieval Russia were bundled together and used as an accepted form of payment centuries before metal coins became widely available across the region. The fur trade was so central to the economy that squirrel pelts were used to pay taxes, settle debts, and purchase goods in everyday transactions. Quality mattered enormously, and a bundle of poorly prepared pelts could be rejected outright by merchants, exactly the way a torn or damaged banknote might be refused today. Imagine paying your taxes with a bag of squirrel fur and having the tax collector inspect each pelt for quality before accepting your payment. Salt blocks in ancient Rome and West Africa were valuable enough to be traded directly as currency, since salt was essential for preserving meat long before refrigeration existed. Roman soldiers were reportedly paid a salt allowance as part of their wages, and the word salary is widely believed to trace directly back to this practice. In parts of West Africa, salt blocks were cut, stamped, and traded with the same seriousness as gold, sometimes exchanged for enslaved people, livestock, or gold dust itself in major trade routes. An entire modern word for your paycheck comes from a substance people once used to season and preserve food. Cacao beans throughout the Aztec Empire functioned as genuine everyday money, used to purchase food, clothing, and virtually any other goods sold in local markets. Prices were specific and well documented. A single turkey could reportedly be purchased for around 100 cacao beans, while a rabbit cost far fewer. Because cacao beans were also edible and used to make a bitter ceremonial drink, counterfeiters sometimes hollowed out the beans and refilled the shells with sand or dirt to pass them off as full-weight currency. People were literally committing currency fraud using chocolate centuries before anyone invented counterfeit paper bills. Tea bricks across China, Tibet, and Mongolia functioned as compressed blocks of tea leaves that functioned simultaneously as money and as an actual food or drink product. If a merchant ever needed the tea itself rather than its trade value, the brick could simply be broken apart, boiled, and consumed like normal tea. Because tea bricks didn't spoil for years, they became especially practical in remote mountain regions where metal coins were scarce and difficult to transport across harsh terrain. Imagine paying a debt with a brick of tea, then watching the person who received it break off a piece and boil themselves a cup on the spot. Cowrie shells across Africa, Asia, and Oceania became one of the longest continuously used currencies in human history, circulating for well over 3,000 years across multiple continents. Their small size, natural durability, and glossy uniform appearance made them nearly impossible to counterfeit using the technology available at the time. Cowrie shells were eventually exchanged in such enormous volume during the transatlantic slave trade that some estimates suggest hundreds of tons of shells were shipped specifically to be used as currency for purchasing enslaved people. A small ocean shell became directly tied to one of the darkest trade systems in human history, simply because everyone agreed it held value. Beaver pelts throughout colonial North America became the standard unit of trade in the fur trade economy, driven almost entirely by extreme demand for felt hats back in Europe. Trade posts developed official, standardized exchange rates, where a single high-quality beaver pelt could be traded for a specific number of knives, kettles, or other manufactured goods. Demand became so intense that beavers were hunted to near extinction across large parts of the continent, permanently altering entire regional ecosystems just to keep a fur-based currency system running. An entire species was pushed to the edge of extinction because European fashion trends turned its fur into hard currency. Wampum beads, used by Native American tribes and later adopted throughout colonial America, were small cylindrical beads carved from purple and white shells strung together into belts. Wampum originally held deep ceremonial, diplomatic, and storytelling significance long before Europeans arrived, used to record treaties and important agreements between nations. Colonial settlers eventually adopted wampum as official legal tender in several colonies, going so far as to fix exact exchange rates between wampum beads and English currency. A sacred diplomatic and storytelling object was formally converted into government-recognized cash by colonial law. Knife money in ancient China consisted of bronze currency deliberately cast in the shape of small, blunt trade knives, complete with a handle, blade, and small hole for stringing multiple pieces together. These weren't sharpened weapons, they were symbolic, likely evolving from a time when actual knives and tools were bartered directly before evolving into standardized metal currency. Different regional kingdoms cast their own distinct knife money designs, and collectors today can often identify exactly which kingdom minted a specific piece based on its blade shape and handle style. Ancient China essentially invented branded currency, using recognizable knife shapes the same way modern currencies use recognizable portraits. Feather money used across the Santa Cruz Islands consisted of long coils meticulously covered with thousands of tiny red feathers plucked from a specific local bird species. A single coil could require the feathers of dozens of birds and weeks of careful craftsmanship, making the finished coil itself a display of enormous invested labor. Somewhere, an entire economy ran on currency that took longer to manufacture than the item it was eventually used to purchase. Tabua, or polished whale teeth in Fiji, served as one of the most prestigious forms of ceremonial currency, reserved specifically for weddings, treaties, and major social exchanges. A single tabua couldn't simply be handed over casually. Presenting one carried deep ceremonial weight, often accompanying a formal spoken request or apology. Because sperm whale teeth were rare and difficult to obtain, tabua eventually became so valuable that European traders began importing whale teeth from other regions specifically to sell into the Fijian ceremonial economy. An entire international trade route developed just to supply one island chain with the teeth needed for its ceremonial currency. Dolphin teeth throughout the Solomon Islands were strung together into long necklaces and used as a recognized form of money, dowry payment, and public status symbol. A single dolphin hunt could yield hundreds of teeth, and specific communities became known specifically for organizing large, coordinated dolphin drives just to harvest teeth for currency production. Entire coordinated hunts were organized purely to manufacture money out of teeth. You'd think enormous limestone discs are the strangest currency on this list. They're actually the strangest story on this list, for a completely different reason. Back on the Yap Islands, one particular rhinestone became legendary, not because of its size, but because of what happened to it on way home. Generations ago, a group of islanders were transporting a massive rhinestone by raft across open ocean when a violent storm hit and the enormous stone sank straight to the bottom of the sea. The men survived, the stone did not. It has never been recovered and likely never will be. And yet, to this day, the Japanese community still recognizes that sunken stone as legitimate currency, fully owned by a specific family, and still tradable in transactions exactly like any stone sitting visibly in the village. Nobody has ever seen it. Nobody can touch it. It's sitting somewhere on the ocean floor, possibly forever, and it still counts as real, spendable wealth because the entire community simply agreed that it does. A piece of currency has been sitting at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean for generations, and it's still considered perfectly valid money. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If money is really just a shared agreement that something has value, how much different is a sunken stone from the numbers sitting in your bank account right now?